I am Baxter Montgomery, 34 years old, and the oldest son of Richard Montgomery. Growing up in a middle-class family in Portland, Oregon, with my younger brother Mason, taught me a lot about family dynamics. What I never expected was that a simple family dinner would explode into an ultimatum that would change everything. My father made his expectations crystal clear. I must work myself to exhaustion while my brother lives for free, or I would be out of the family. Before I tell you how I walked away from my family and what happened after, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against unfair treatment. Growing up in Portland was mostly a positive experience. My father, Richard Montgomery, was the embodiment of the American dream. He started his construction business with just a pickup truck, a toolbox, and a relentless work ethic that became the cornerstone of our family values. Montgomery Construction grew from a one-man operation into a respected local company that employed 20 people by the time I was in high school. My mother, Eleanor, had been a dedicated nurse when she met my father. After Mason was born, she made the decision to become a stay-at-home mom. She poured her heart into raising us and supporting my father as he built his business. Our home was modest but comfortable, and the message was always clear: hard work, responsibility, and family loyalty were everything. Mason and I were only 3 years apart, and in our early childhood we were inseparable. I have fond memories of building forts in the backyard, riding bikes through the neighborhood, and defending each other from playground bullies. But as we entered our teenage years, the differences between us became more pronounced. I was always the more serious one. School came naturally to me, and I threw myself into academics and sports with the same intensity I saw in my father at work. By 16, I was captain of the debate team, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and played varsity baseball. My father would proudly introduce me to his business associates, saying, "This is my son Baxter. He is going places." Mason, on the other hand, struggled. Schoolwork was difficult for him, and rather than push through, he would often give up. His grades were mediocre at best, and he cycled through different sports and activities without committing to any of them. Instead of addressing these issues, my parents, especially my father, would make excuses for him. "Mason is just creative," my mother would say. "He sees the world differently." "Not everyone is cut out for academics," my father would add. "He will find his path eventually." What bothered me was not that they supported Mason through his struggles. That was what good parents should do. What bothered me was the double standard. When I brought home an A-, my father would ask, "What happened to the plus?" When Mason brought home a C, there would be celebration like he had won a Nobel Prize. The summer I turned 16, my father decided it was time for me to learn the family business from the ground up. While my friends were hanging out at the mall or the lake, I was hauling lumber cleaning job sites and learning how to read blueprints. The work was exhausting, but I took pride in it, just as my father had taught me. "This is how you build character," he would tell me, as we drove home covered in sawdust and sweat. "This is how you become a man." Mason, meanwhile, spent his summers playing video games and hanging out with friends. When he turned 16, I expected him to join me at the construction company, but my father never pushed the issue. "Your brother is not like you," he explained when I asked about it. "He needs time to figure things out." College continued this pattern. I secured a partial scholarship to the University of Oregon to study business, but it still was not enough to cover all expenses. I worked 20 hours a week at a campus bookstore, maintained my grades, and graduated with honors. I was proud of what I had accomplished and how I had done it largely on my own. Mason attempted community college 3 separate times. Each attempt ended the same way: dropped classes, wasted tuition that my parents paid in full, and another excuse about why college just was not right for him. After the third attempt, my parents stopped pushing the education angle. Mason moved back home, and my father gave him an administrative job at his company, a job that Mason showed up late for more often than not, and eventually quit because the environment was too stressful. Despite all this, I tried not to feel resentful. Mason was my brother, and I loved him. Maybe he really did need more time to find his way. Maybe he really did have different talents that just had not revealed themselves yet. I focused on building my own life, landing a job at a marketing firm in Portland, where I quickly advanced from junior copywriter to senior marketing strategist within 5 years. Every Sunday I would return to my parents' house for dinner. These meals became increasingly uncomfortable as my father would boast about my accomplishments while Mason sat silently across the table pushing food around his plate. I could see the hurt in his eyes, and part of me felt guilty for succeeding where he seemed to fail. But another part of me wondered why he never seemed to try and why my parents never required him to. I wanted to believe this phase would pass, that Mason would eventually find his footing, and my parents would establish equal expectations for both of us. I had no idea that the inequality would only grow deeper and more damaging in the years to come. Fast forward to our early 30s. I had established myself firmly in the marketing industry, working as a senior marketing director for a respected firm in Portland. My hard work had paid off. I owned a modest but modern apartment in a good neighborhood, drove a reliable car that I had paid off early, and had been dating Samantha, a brilliant intellectual property attorney, for 2 years. We were talking about marriage and building a life together. Things were going well for me professionally and personally. Mason, at 31, was still drifting. In the past decade, he had held 7 different jobs, none lasting longer than 8 months. His resume read like a tour of Portland's service industry: barista, server, sales associate, dog walker, rideshare driver, warehouse worker, and most recently assistant at a gym that closed down during the pandemic. Each job ended for a different reason: a conflict with management schedule, inflexibility, toxic workplace culture, or simply boredom. His personal life mirrored the instability of his career. He had cycled through relationships, never maintaining one long enough to become serious. He had lived in 5 different apartments, each time breaking the lease early and forfeiting security deposits. And after each setback, the pattern was the same. Mason would show up at our parents' doorstep, suitcase in hand, and they would welcome him with open arms. "It is just temporary," they would assure me when I expressed concern. "He just needs to get back on his feet." But temporary had stretched into years. Mason had been living in our parents' basement for the past 14 months with no sign of leaving. He contributed nothing to household expenses despite my father's business doing well, and my mother having taken a part-time position at a local clinic to keep herself busy. The inequality became impossible to ignore when my father called me one Friday evening as I was finishing up work. "Baxter," he said, his voice tense with stress, "I need your help. 2 of my crew leaders quit this week, and I have 3 major projects that need to be completed by the end of the month. I know you have your marketing job, but I need someone I can trust to help oversee these projects on the weekends." I was taken aback. "Dad, I work 50 hours a week already. Weekends are the only time I have with Samantha and to take care of my own life." "This is an emergency," he insisted. "Family has to step up in emergencies." I thought about Mason literally living in the house with no job and nothing but free time. "What about Mason? Can he help?" There was a pause. "Your brother is not in a good place right now. He is dealing with some anxiety issues. I cannot put this kind of pressure on him." The irony was not lost on me. Mason was too fragile to be asked to work, but I was expected to sacrifice my limited free time despite having a demanding full-time job. Still, I reluctantly agreed. Family was family, and my father rarely asked for help. For the next 2 months, I spent every Saturday and Sunday at construction sites, managing crews, dealing with suppliers, and solving problems. The work was exhausting, and my relationship with Samantha became strained as our quality time together disappeared. Meanwhile, Mason spent his days playing video games in the basement or going out with friends who somehow never helped him find employment. One Sunday evening, after a particularly grueling day solving a major issue with a concrete pour, I arrived at my parents' house for the weekly family dinner. I was exhausted, my back aching from being on my feet for 12 hours. As I walked in, I found Mason lounging on the couch, controller in hand, the same place he had been when I left that morning. "Rough day?" he asked casually, not even pausing his game. I bit my tongue and headed to the kitchen where my mother was preparing dinner. "Mason has been in the same spot all day," I observed quietly. My mother gave me a look of warning. "He applied for a job online yesterday. He is trying Baxter." "One job application. Wow." The sarcasm slipped out before I could stop it. "Not everyone is like you," she said, a familiar refrain. "Mason struggles with motivation. The more we push, the more he pulls away." During dinner, my father talked about the progress on the projects I had been helping with. Baxter has been a godsend these past weekends, he announced. A natural leader just like his old man. I watched Mason shrink in his chair, and despite my frustration, I felt a pang of sympathy. It cannot be easy to constantly live in someone's shadow. But then my father continued. I need you again next weekend, Baxter. The Jefferson project is behind schedule. I put down my fork. Dad, I cannot do this anymore. I have my own job, my own life. I have barely seen Samantha in weeks. We all have to make sacrifices, he replied dismissively. Do we? I asked, looking pointedly at Mason. All of us. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother jumped in with a change of subject, and the moment passed, but the inequality remained. Later that night, I vented to Samantha over the phone. It is like they live in an alternate reality, I said. They expect everything from me and nothing from him. It is not fair to you, Samantha agreed. And honestly, it is not fair to Mason either. They are not helping him by shielding him from responsibility. I know I sighed. But what can I do? They are my parents. This is my family. Sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries, she said gently. You are enabling this situation as much as they are by going along with it. Her words stuck with me, but I was not ready to rock the boat. Not yet. The pattern of inequality had become so familiar that despite my resentment, it was easier to maintain the status quo than to challenge it. But events were about to force my hand, bringing the simmering tension to a full boil. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of presenting a campaign proposal to a major client when my phone vibrated repeatedly in my pocket. Normally, I would never check my phone during a meeting, but the persistence of the calls concerned me. Excusing myself briefly, I stepped out to see 5 missed calls from my mother. My stomach dropped. Mom, what is wrong? It is your father, she said, her voice shaking. He is in the hospital. He had a heart attack at work. The next hours were a blur. The rushed drive to the hospital, the sterile waiting room, the concerned doctors. Thankfully, it was a minor heart attack, a warning rather than a tragedy. But it was serious enough that the cardiologist was adamant Richard Montgomery needed to significantly reduce his stress and workload. For the next 2 weeks, I split my time between the hospital, my job, and helping to keep my father's business running. Mason visited the hospital, occasionally bringing magazines and sitting awkwardly at our father's bedside, but he made no offers to help with the company. My mother was too focused on my father's recovery to notice or care about this imbalance. 3 weeks after his heart attack, my father was released from the hospital with strict orders to take it easy. To celebrate his homecoming, my mother planned a special family dinner. I arrived early to help prepare while Mason emerged from the basement, just as the food was being put on the table. As we ate, my father cleared his throat. I have been doing some thinking about the future, he announced. This health scare has been a wake-up call. I cannot run the business the way I used to. We all nodded. This was not surprising. So I have made some decisions, he continued. I am going to semi-retire. I will still oversee major decisions, but I need someone to handle the day-to-day operations. He looked directly at me, and I felt a creeping sense of dread. Baxter, you have proven yourself these past weeks. You know the business. The crews respect you. I need you to step up and take over the operational side of Montgomery Construction. I put down my fork slowly. Dad, I have a career, a good one. I cannot just abandon it to run your business. Not abandon, he corrected. You can do both. Manage the marketing stuff during the week and handle the construction business in your off hours. At least until we can hire and train someone suitable. I stared at him in disbelief. That is not realistic. Both are full-time jobs. You managed it these past weeks, he pointed out. Because it was an emergency. That is different from a permanent arrangement. My father's expression hardened. This is family, Baxter. Family comes first. I glanced at Mason, who was studying his plate, intently avoiding eye contact. What about Mason? He lives here. He does not have a job. Why not train him to run the business? My father waved dismissively. Your brother is not cut out for that kind of pressure. And I am. On top of my existing career. You have always been the responsible one, my father said, as if this was a compliment rather than a life sentence. So I am being punished for being responsible, I said quietly. My mother jumped in. Nobody is punishing you, honey. We are just asking for your help during a difficult time. You are asking me to work 2 full-time jobs indefinitely, while Mason contributes nothing, I clarified. How is that fair? Life is not fair, my father snapped. I built this business from nothing to provide for this family. The least you could do is help preserve it. I have been helping, I reminded him, for months. But this is different. You are asking me to sacrifice my career, my relationship, my life, while expecting nothing from Mason. Your brother has his own challenges, my mother said defensively. We all have challenges, I countered. That does not mean we get to opt out of responsibility. My father's face was reddening dangerous given his condition. This is not a negotiation, Baxter. Either you step up for this family, or you are not part of it anymore. The table fell silent. Even my mother looked shocked. Richard, she said softly, you do not mean that. I do, he insisted, glaring at me. I am not asking for the impossible. I am asking for loyalty. I looked around the table. My father face flushed with anger. My mother eyes pleading for peace. Mason still examining his plate as if it contained the secrets of the universe. And something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally broke. I need some air, I said, pushing back from the table. I walked out to the back porch and took deep breaths of the cool evening air, trying to process what had just happened. My own father had threatened to disown me for refusing to work myself to exhaustion, while my brother coasted through life without consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from Samantha. How's dinner going? I called her instead of texting back. When she answered, I recounted the conversation, my voice shaking despite my efforts to remain calm. He cannot be serious, she said when I finished. He seemed pretty serious to me. What are you going to do? I stared up at the stars, visible now that I was away from the city lights. I do not know. I love my parents. I love my job. I do not want to choose. But he is making you choose, Samantha pointed out. And it is not really a choice at all. He is asking you to sacrifice everything, while asking nothing of Mason. Maybe I should just do it temporarily, I said already, knowing it was a bad idea, just until he finds someone else. And how long will that take? Months, years. You know they will keep moving the goalposts, Bax. They always do. She was right. This was a pattern, not an isolated incident. If I gave in now, nothing would change. The inequality would persist, perhaps worsen. I would resent my family more with each passing day, and they would never understand why. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying my father's ultimatum in my mind. By morning I knew what I had to do, but the knowledge brought no peace, only a heavy resignation and the certainty that whatever choice I made, something valuable would be lost. The next day I called my parents and arranged to meet them that evening. I needed to deliver my decision in person. I spent the day at work distracted, running through what I would say, how I would say it. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands were sweating on the steering wheel despite the cool temperature. My mother answered the door, her smile strained. Your father is in the living room, she said quietly. I noticed Mason was conspicuously absent, probably hiding in the basement, avoiding the conflict he knew was coming. My father sat in his recliner, looking smaller somehow than he had before his heart attack. The medical scare had aged him, but his expression was as stubborn as ever. Have you thought about what we discussed? He asked without preamble. I sat down across from him, meeting his gaze directly. I have, and I cannot do what you are asking. His jaw tightened. Cannot or will not. Both, I admitted. I cannot manage 2 full-time jobs without destroying my health and my relationship, and I will not accept being held to a completely different standard than Mason. This is not about your brother, my father said dismissively. It is absolutely about Mason, I countered. It is about the fact that you have expected everything from me and nothing from him for our entire lives. It is about the double standard that has defined our family dynamic for as long as I can remember. My mother, who had been hovering in the doorway, came to sit beside my father. We have never treated you unfairly, Baxter. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, do you remember when I got a B+ in advanced chemistry? and Dad lectured me for an hour about applying myself. The same semester Mason failed basic algebra, and you both decided he just was not a math person. That is how it has always been. Your brother has different strengths, she insisted. What strengths? Name one thing you have ever required him to excel at. One standard you have held him to. Her silence was answer enough. Look, I said, softening my tone. I love you both. I love Mason. But this situation is not healthy for any of us. I cannot sacrifice my life to prop up a business while he contributes nothing. And frankly, continuing to shield him from responsibility is hurting him, not helping him. My father leaned forward, his voice dangerously quiet. So that is it. When your family needs you most, you are just going to walk away. I am not walking away from my family, I clarified. I am refusing to accept unfair treatment. There is a difference. Not to me, he said coldly. Either you help with the business, or you are not my son anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. Even my mother gasped. Richard, stop it, she pleaded. But he shook his head. I mean it. This family has always been about loyalty and sacrifice. If Baxter cannot understand that, then he has no place here. I stood slowly, a strange calm settling over me despite the storm of emotions inside. Then I guess I have no place here. Baxter, please. My mother began, tears filling her eyes. I am sorry, Mom. I love you, but I cannot live like this anymore. I walked to the door, half expecting, half hoping that my father would call me back, that he would realize the enormity of what he was doing. But the house remained silent behind me as I got into my car and drove away. The next weeks were the hardest of my life. Silence from my family felt like a physical absence, a phantom limb I kept reaching for, only to find it gone. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office to avoid going home to an empty apartment. Samantha was my rock, listening patiently as I cycled through anger, grief, and doubt. Did I do the right thing? I asked her one night 3 weeks after the confrontation. Only you can answer that, she said. But ask yourself this. If you had given in, would anything have changed? Or would you just be delaying the inevitable while making yourself miserable? She was right. The pattern was too entrenched, the inequality too fundamental to our family dynamic. By walking away, I had finally refused to participate in a system that had been hurting all of us, even if my parents and brother could not see it. A month after I walked away, I received a text from my mother. Your father misses you, even if he will not admit it. Please come home. We can work this out. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I love you, Mom, but I cannot come back unless things change. Really change. She did not reply. I learned through mutual friends that Mason had indeed been installed in some role at the construction company despite having no experience or qualifications. Apparently my father had decided that if I would not step up, he would force Mason to do so. I could have told him it would not work. You cannot force responsibility on someone who has never had to develop it, but no one was asking for my opinion anymore. Instead, I focused on what I could control. I worked hard at my marketing job, earning a promotion to executive director. Samantha and I grew closer through the crisis, our relationship strengthening in the fire of adversity. And slowly I began to heal from the pain of my family's rejection, learning to build a life that was not defined by their expectations or approval. The silence stretched to 3 months. I missed Sunday dinners, holiday, planning the small rituals of family life. But I did not miss the constant pressure, the unfair expectations, the nagging sense that nothing I did would ever be enough. For the first time in my adult life, I was living on my own terms, and despite the pain, there was freedom in that. I had no way of knowing that the situation was about to change dramatically, that my family's world was collapsing in my absence, and that soon they would be forced to confront the consequences of years of unequal treatment and enabling behavior. 3 months and 2 weeks after I walked away from my family, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Spam calls were common, but something made me answer. Baxter Montgomery. The voice was familiar but unexpected. Yes, who is this? It is Harold Wilson, your father's business partner. Harold had been with my father nearly from the beginning of Montgomery Construction. A master carpenter with a head for numbers, he had helped turn my father's one-man operation into a legitimate business. I had always respected him. "Harold, it has been a while. How are you?" "Not good, son. Not good at all." His voice was heavy with worry. "I am calling because the business is in serious trouble." My heart sank despite everything. "What kind of trouble?" "Every kind. Projects behind schedule. Clients threatening to sue. Bills piling up. Your brother." He stopped abruptly. "My brother? What?" Harold sighed deeply. "Look, I do not want to speak ill of your family, but Mason has been making decisions that are questionable at best. Your father put him in charge of operations, but the boy has no experience, no knowledge, and frankly no work ethic." I closed my eyes unsurprised, but still disappointed. "Why are you telling me this, Harold?" "Because your father will not listen to me. He is convinced Mason just needs time to find his footing. Meanwhile, the business your father spent 30 years building is circling the drain. We have lost 3 major clients in the past month alone. I am sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "But what do you expect me to do? My father made it clear I am not welcome, unless I agree to his terms." "I know about your falling out," Harold admitted. "And I am not asking you to come back on his terms. But this company supports 15 families, Baxter. Good people who have been loyal to your father for years. They do not deserve to lose their livelihoods because of family drama." His words hit home. I had worked alongside many of these people during my summers at the company. They were hard-working, decent folks who had nothing to do with my family's dysfunction. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked cautiously. "Talk to your father. Make him see reason. Mason is running this company into the ground, and Richard is too stubborn to admit he made a mistake. You are the only one he might listen to." I laughed bitterly. "The last time I tried to talk sense into my father, he disowned me." "Then do it for the people who will lose their jobs when this company folds. Because that is where we are headed, Baxter. Another few months of this and Montgomery Construction will be nothing but a memory." After hanging up, I sat in my office staring out the window at the Portland skyline. Part of me, the hurt, angry part, thought this was fitting. My father had made his choice, chosen Mason over me, and now he was facing the consequences. But another part of me ached at the thought of my father's life's work crumbling, of good people losing their jobs because of my family's dysfunction. I called Samantha and told her about the conversation. "What are you thinking of doing?" she asked when I finished. "Nothing," I said firmly. "This is not my problem to solve. My father made it very clear where I stand." "Are you sure that is the right call?" "What would you have me do?" "Go crawling back. Let him win." "This is not about winning or losing, Bax," she said gently. "This is about 15 families who might lose their income because your father and brother are too stubborn or incapable to run the business properly. So I should sacrifice myself to save them. That is not fair either." No one said anything about sacrifice. But maybe there is a middle ground. A way to help without compromising your boundaries. I considered her words. Maybe, but I need to think about it. In the following weeks, I heard more reports about Montgomery Construction's decline. A colleague mentioned seeing equipment being repossessed from a job site. Another told me about a mutual acquaintance who had hired the company for a renovation, only to fire them halfway through due to delays and shoddy workmanship. The business my father had built with sweat and determination was disintegrating before everyone's eyes. Then, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, I found my mother standing there, soaked from the rain, looking exhausted and worried. "Mom," I said, surprised. "Come in. Let me get you a towel." She stepped inside hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome. I handed her a towel and made her a cup of tea while she dried off. "Your place is nice," she said, looking around. "Very clean." "Thanks." I sat across from her. "What brings you here, Mom?" She cupped her hands around the mug, avoiding my eyes. "I miss you, Baxter. We all do. Even Dad." She gave a small, sad smile. "Your father is complicated. He misses you but will not admit it. His pride will not let him. And Mason, does he miss me too?" Her expression clouded. "Mason is going through a difficult time. So I have heard. How is the business doing?" She flinched slightly. "It has been challenging. Your father is still not at full strength after his heart attack, and Mason is learning." From what I hear, the business is falling apart, Mom. Harold called me. Harold should mind his own business, she said sharply, then immediately looked contrite. I am sorry. Things have been stressful. I can imagine. I leaned forward. Mom, why are you really here? She fidgeted with her mug. I told you. I miss you. And nothing. Can a mother not visit her son without an ulterior motive? Normally, yes, but given how things ended and the current situation, I find it hard to believe you just happened to stop by. Tears filled her eyes. Everything is such a mess, Baxter. The business is struggling. Your father is stressed, which is terrible for his heart. Mason is. Mason is not handling the pressure well. What does that mean? She hesitated. He has been making some questionable decisions, buying new equipment we cannot afford, hiring friends who have no construction experience, missing important meetings with clients. Sounds like Mason, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He is trying, she insisted the familiar refrain. He just was not prepared for this level of responsibility. No one ever prepared him for any level of responsibility, Mom. That is the problem. She looked down, unable to refute this truth. Your father would never admit this, but we need your help, Baxter. The business is everything to him, if it fails. And there it was, the real reason for her visit. Not because they missed me or recognized the unfairness of their treatment, but because they needed me to clean up the mess they had created. I cannot fix this, Mom, I said gently, even if I wanted to. You could advise. Help guide Mason, just until things stabilize. I shook my head. Dad disowned me. He said I was not his son anymore. And now you want me to come back and rescue the business from the son he chose. How is that fair to me? Life is not always fair, she said, echoing my father's words from that fateful night. No, it is not, I agreed. But I get to choose whether I participate in the unfairness, and I choose not to. She wiped away tears. So you will just let everything your father built collapse? Out of spite. Not spite, Mom. Self-respect. Dad made his choice. Now he has to live with it. So do you. So does Mason. She left shortly after our conversation unresolved. As I watched her car pull away, I felt a mixture of guilt and resolve. I had not caused this situation. I had merely refused to enable it any longer. And while part of me ached to help to fix things as I always had, I knew that doing so would only perpetuate the cycle that had brought us to this point. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come, that the full collapse of my family's world was imminent, and that soon they would be forced to face the consequences of years of unequal treatment in ways none of us could have anticipated. 6 months after I walked away from my family, I was in the middle of a presentation when my phone buzzed repeatedly in my pocket. Remembering the last time this had happened, when my father had his heart attack, I excused myself as soon as I could and checked my messages. 5 missed calls from my mother, followed by a text that made my blood run cold. Your father is in the hospital again. Much worse this time. Please come. I rushed to the hospital, my mind racing with possibilities, all of them bad. When I arrived, my mother was in the waiting room, looking years older than when I had last seen her. She rose unsteadily when she saw me. Baxter, she said, her voice breaking as she embraced me. Thank you for coming. What happened? I asked, guiding her back to her seat. Another heart attack. Massive this time. He was at the office reviewing some paperwork when he collapsed. If Harold had not been there, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Is he going to be okay? They are not sure yet. He is in surgery now. She gripped my hand. Baxter, there is something else you need to know. The gravity in her voice alarmed me. What is it? The business. It is finished. Your father filed for bankruptcy last week. And Mason. She broke off, covering her face. What about Mason? She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He is gone. He emptied the business accounts 3 days ago and disappeared. Almost $50,000. I sat back, stunned. Even knowing Mason's history of irresponsibility, I had never imagined he would stoop to theft. Have you called the police? She shook her head. Your father refused. He said he would not have his son arrested no matter what he had done. The irony was almost too much to bear. My father would disown me for refusing to work 2 jobs, but he would protect Mason even after he had stolen from the family business. Where is Mason now? We do not know. He is not answering his phone. His room is cleared out. She twisted her wedding ring anxiously. I keep thinking he will come back once he realizes what he has done, but we both knew better. Mason had never faced consequences for his actions. Why would he start now? We sat in silence for a while, the magnitude of the situation sinking in. The business was bankrupt. Mason had stolen what little was left and vanished. And now my father was fighting for his life, his dreams in ruins. Hours later, a doctor approached us. "Mrs. Montgomery, your husband is out of surgery. He is stable, but it was a close call. The next 48 hours will be critical." My mother sagged with relief. "Can we see him?" "Briefly. He is heavily sedated." We followed the doctor to the ICU, where my father lay connected to various machines, looking frail and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. My mother went immediately to his side, taking his hand, whispering words of comfort. I hung back, unsure of my place in this moment. To my surprise, my father's eyes fluttered open. He looked first at my mother, then his gaze shifted to me. Recognition dawned, followed by something that looked like shame. "Baxter," he said, his voice barely audible. I stepped closer. "Hey, Dad. Save your strength." He shook his head slightly. "Need to talk. To you. Later," I said. "When you are stronger." "May not be. A later." His breathing was labored. I was wrong. 3 simple words I had never expected to hear from Richard Montgomery, a man whose stubborn pride had defined him for as long as I could remember. "It is okay, Dad. Just rest now." "No," he insisted. "Need you. To know. Should have listened. Should have. Seen what was happening." A tear slipped from the corner of his eye. "I failed. Failed both my sons." My throat tightened. "We can talk about this when you are better." But he continued, determined to say his piece. "Always easier. To push you. Knew you could take it. Mason, I thought I was helping him. I was wrong." The doctor returned, then frowning at my father's agitation. "That is enough for now. Mr. Montgomery needs rest." We were ushered out, my father's words hanging in the air between us. My mother and I returned to the waiting room, both lost in our thoughts. "He has been like that since the bankruptcy," she said finally, filled with regret, seeing things clearly for the first time. "It should not have taken all this," I said quietly. "No," she agreed. "It should not have. We were blind, Baxter. So blind. We thought we were protecting Mason, but we were crippling him. And we took you for granted because you were strong." It was the closest thing to an apology I had received, and I accepted it for what it was. "What happens now, with the business bankrupt and the house?" "We will lose the house," she confirmed. "The mortgage was refinanced to prop up the business. We cannot make the payments." "Where will you go?" "I do not know." She looked defeated. "We have a little savings. Enough for a small apartment, maybe." "And Mason?" She shook her head. "I do not know that either. If he comes back, things will be different. They have to be." Over the next few days, as my father's condition stabilized, the full extent of the disaster became clear. Montgomery Construction was beyond saving. 30 years of my father's life gone. The family home would be foreclosed upon. And my parents, who had once seemed invincible to me, were broken, their illusions shattered. A week after his admission, my father was strong enough for a longer conversation. I sat beside his hospital bed, the two of us alone for the first time since our confrontation 6 months earlier. "The doctors say you are improving," I said. He nodded weakly. "Physically, maybe. That is what matters right now." "No," he disagreed. "What matters is that I fix what I can while I still have time." He took a labored breath. "I was wrong, Baxter. About everything. The way I treated you. The way I favored Mason. All of it." I had waited years to hear these words, but now that they had come, I found no satisfaction in them. "It is water under the bridge, Dad. I need to say this." He reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "I always leaned on you because I knew you could handle it. I thought I was preparing you for life. But with Mason, I made excuses, lowered the bar, told myself I was being understanding, but really I was just taking the easy way out. Why, I asked the question that had haunted me for years. He was quiet for a moment. Mason reminded me of my younger brother. Same struggles in school, same lack of direction. My parents were hard on him, and he did not make it. Drugs. Suicide at 22. He swallowed hard. I swore I would not make the same mistake with my sons. Instead, I made a different one. The revelation stunned me. I had never known about this uncle, this family tragedy that had shaped my father's parenting in ways none of us understood. I overcompensated, he continued, protected Mason too much, expected too much from you. And now look at us. Business gone, house gone, Mason gone. His eyes filled with tears. I failed everyone. Not everyone, I said softly. I am still here. He gripped my hand tighter. After how I treated you. Why? Because you are my father. Despite everything, I do not deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, I agreed. But families are not about what we deserve. They are about what we choose. And I choose to be here now. In that moment, something shifted between us. Not a complete healing that would take much longer, but a beginning. An acknowledgement of wrongs done, and a tentative step towards something new. As my father recovered, we had many such conversations. Painful, honest talks about the patterns that had damaged our family. My mother joined some of these discussions, adding her own regrets and realizations. For the first time, we were seeing each other clearly, without the distortions of favoritism and enabling that had defined us for so long. Meanwhile, the practical consequences of the collapse continued to unfold. My parents sold their few remaining assets to pay down debts. They found a small 2-bedroom apartment that they could afford on my mother's part-time salary and what little they had saved. The transition was humbling for them, especially my father, who had once been a respected business owner in the community. And then, almost 2 months after his disappearance, Mason returned. Not triumphantly, but broken and broke, having burned through the stolen money with nothing to show for it. He showed up at my apartment knowing he could no longer go to our parents' house because it was no longer theirs. I almost did not recognize him at first. He was thinner, haggard, his eyes haunted. I messed up, Bax, he said, his voice cracking. I messed up so bad. For years I had imagined what I would say to Mason if given the chance. All the accusations, all the resentment I had harbored. But looking at him now, I felt only sadness for the man who had never been given the chance to grow up. Yes, you did. I agreed, not sugarcoating it. But now you have a choice. Keep running or face what you have done and try to make it right. How, he asked, desperation in his voice. How do I make this right? One step at a time, I said. Starting with Mom and Dad. The reunion between Mason and our parents was not the tearful, joyous scene it might once have been. There was love, yes, but also anger, disappointment, and hard truths that could no longer be avoided. My father, still recovering but growing stronger, did something I had never seen him do with Mason. He held him accountable. We love you, he told Mason, but what you did was wrong, criminal, and there will be consequences. Mason agreed to repay what he had stolen, though we all knew it would take years. More importantly, he agreed to get a job, a real one, not another temporary position he would abandon at the first sign of difficulty. And for the first time, our parents were united in their insistence that he follow through. The road ahead would be long and difficult. My father's health was permanently compromised. My parents faced financial hardship they had never anticipated in their retirement years. Mason had to learn responsibility decades too late, and I had to learn to trust again, to believe that the changes I was seeing were real and lasting. But amid the ruins of what had been, something new was taking shape, a family based on honesty rather than illusion, on equal expectations rather than favoritism, on genuine support rather than enabling. It was painful, this rebirth, but it was also in its way beautiful. 1 year after my father's second heart attack, we gathered in my parents' modest apartment to celebrate his 65th birthday. The space was small but warm, filled with the people who mattered most. My father, thinner, but more at peace than I had seen him in years. My mother, who had returned to nursing part-time and found renewed purpose in her work. Mason, now 8 months into a steady job as an assistant manager at a local hardware store, the longest he had ever held a position. Samantha, now, my fiancée, her quiet strength, a constant reminder of why boundaries matter, and me changed in ways I was still discovering. A toast, my father said, raising his glass of sparkling cider alcohol now forbidden by his doctors, to second chances. We clinked glasses, the simple gesture carrying the weight of all we had been through. The journey to this moment had been neither quick nor easy. After the bankruptcy and Mason's return, we had faced difficult decisions about how to move forward. The construction business was gone, but there were still clients who respected my father's expertise. I suggested he consider consulting, sharing his knowledge, without the stress of running a company. I could help you set it up, I offered. Create a website, develop some marketing materials, low overhead, flexible hours, good for your health. He agreed, and Montgomery Construction Consulting was born. It was a modest enterprise, nothing like the company he had once run, but it provided some income, and more importantly, a sense of purpose for a man who had defined himself by his work. For my part, I had made it clear from the beginning that I would help, but with conditions. I will not quit my job, I told my father. I will not sacrifice my relationship with Samantha, and I expect Mason to contribute equally to supporting this family. To my surprise, my father agreed without argument. You are right, he said. It is time everyone pulled their weight. And remarkably, everyone did. My mother returned to nursing, her skills still in demand, despite her years away from the profession. Mason, after some false starts and one relapse into old patterns, found stability in his hardware store job, where his manager provided the structure and accountability he had always needed. As for me, I used my marketing expertise to help establish my father's consulting business, but I maintained clear boundaries around my time and energy. No more uneven expectations, no more unfair demands. And to my relief, my parents respected these boundaries, perhaps finally understanding the damage their previous approach had caused. The healing was not just practical, but emotional as well. My parents sold their large house using the limited equity to pay down debts and move into an apartment they could afford. The downsizing was difficult for them, a tangible reminder of all they had lost. But it also forced them to confront the reality they had been avoiding, that their enabling of Mason and their unfair expectations of me had contributed to the collapse of everything they had built. Family therapy became a regular part of our lives. At first, Mason resisted, uncomfortable with the accountability and self-reflection it required. But after missing 2 sessions and facing united disappointment from all of us, not just me but our parents as well, he committed to the process. In those sessions, years of dysfunction were gradually untangled. My father spoke of his own childhood, of the brother he had lost, and the fear that had driven him to protect Mason at all costs. My mother acknowledged her role in maintaining the unequal dynamic between her sons. Mason confronted his dependency and the ways it had stunted his growth, and I worked through my resentment, learning to forgive without forgetting to love, without compromising my own well-being. Families are systems, our therapist explained. When one part changes, the whole system must adapt. Baxter changed when he walked away, and the system collapsed. Now you are building a new system, one based on healthier patterns. It was not always smooth. Old habits resurfaced. There were arguments, setbacks, moments when it seemed easier to retreat to familiar patterns than to forge new ones. But we persevered, committed to this new vision of family, not perfect but authentic. Not without conflict, but without the toxicity that had defined us for so long. As my father's consulting business stabilized, he made an unexpected decision. I want to make restitution to the employees who lost their jobs, he announced one day. It may take years, but they deserve better than what happened. It was a small gesture. In the grand scheme of things, he could only afford token payments, but it represented something profound, a willingness to take responsibility not just in words but in actions. Mason, too, began to change in ways I had not thought possible. He opened a savings account and contributed to the household expenses. He showed up for family gatherings on time and sober. He began seeing a therapist individually to work through his issues with dependency and responsibility. I never realized how much I was missing by not growing up, he told me during a rare moment of vulnerability. It is hard being accountable, but it also feels, I do not know, real in a way nothing ever has before. Samantha and I got engaged 6 months after my father's second heart attack. I proposed on a hiking trail overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, thanking her for standing by me through the darkest period of my life. "You taught me that boundaries are not walls," I told her, as I slipped the ring on her finger. "They are the foundation of healthy love." Our engagement celebration was the first time our newly reconstructed family felt truly solid. My parents welcomed Samantha warmly, without the undercurrent of manipulation that might once have been present. Mason brought a date, a sensible woman from his therapy group, who seemed to genuinely care for him. We ate, drank, laughed, and for the first time in memory, there was no elephant in the room, no unspoken resentment poisoning the air. Now, a year after the collapse, we were different people in many ways. My father, once defined by his pride and stubbornness, had learned humility. My mother, once an enabler, had found her voice. Mason, once perpetually adolescent, was slowly growing into adulthood. And I, once defined by my resentment and need for approval, had discovered that walking away had ultimately been the most loving thing I could have done for all of us. "I have been thinking," my father said after the birthday cake had been served, "about what I want my legacy to be. It is not the business. It is not even the consulting. It is this. This family, broken, rebuilt stronger at the seams." He looked around the small living room at the faces of those he loved. I spent so many years focused on the wrong things. Achievement, status. I thought I was building something important, but I was actually destroying what mattered most. "We all played our parts, Dad," I said gently. "Yes, but you were the one brave enough to break the pattern." He reached across the table and took my hand. "By walking away, you saved us all." It was a powerful moment, a recognition of the truth we had all come to understand, that sometimes love means boundaries, sometimes healing requires distance, sometimes the most caring thing we can do is refuse to participate in patterns that harm. The road ahead would still have its challenges. Mason's recovery was ongoing, my father's health remained fragile, and the financial damage would take years to repair. But we had found something invaluable, a way to be family without the dysfunction that had nearly destroyed us, a way to love without enabling, to support without sacrificing, to connect without losing ourselves. As I looked around at these people who had hurt me, who I had hurt, who I loved despite everything, I felt a deep sense of peace. Walking away had been the hardest decision of my life, but it had also been the most important, not just for me, but for all of us. So if you are facing a similar situation, unequal expectations, enabling behavior, family dynamics that hurt more than they heal, know this. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary. Sometimes walking away is not the end, but the beginning of something better. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family is built on mutual respect, not sacrifice or enabling.